Continuing our reading in The World and Thorinn by Damon Knight, today is Chapter 12, Section 3. What was to be done now? The only way to get back to the shaft was to descend and go afoot, dragging the bladder after him. Thorinn separated the burning sticks a little. The bladder continued its gentle descent. At length the basket touched the floor, scraped a little, and was still. Thorinn stepped out of the basket. Relieved of his weight, it began to rise. Thorinn caught the trailing cord and felt its tug lift him almost, but not quite, off his feet. To be safe, he knotted the cord around his waist, but when he tried to walk, he found that his feet had no purchase on the floor. The most he could do was to hop straight upward, whereupon the bladder ponderously bobbed upward too, then as gradually settled. While he was puzzling over this, the shapes beyond him caught his eye. At a little distance there were 4 slender curving tracks of pinkish metal, suspended high in the air. In the red gloom they seemed to be aimed at 2 cavernous doorways in the wall beyond. Along the wall, past the metal tracks, he could make out lines of bulbous objects like metal eggs, as big as the bladder. As he watched, an egg detached itself from the row, was lifted to one of the tracks, and disappeared rapidly into a doorway. Presently another egg emerged from the other doorway in a cloud of steam, traveled along another track, and moved out of sight. Whatever these things were, they seemed to be paying no attention to him. He turned away and stared out over the tops of the forest of columns. The best thing, perhaps, would be to build up his fire again, rise to the top of the cavern, then discharge one of his arrows at the ceiling with a cord tied to it. If the pitch held, he could draw the cord in and thus pull the bladder along, then pull the arrow free, shoot it again, and so on. Out there, where the opening of the shaft must be, a tiny dot of red had winked into being. It drifted a little, then hung steady. But now he saw that it was growing brighter. It was coming toward him, and it was moving too fast to be one of the little engines he had slain. Thorinn climbed hurriedly into the basket. "Box," he said bitterly. "What is that engine?" "It is an engine like the one that took you prisoner before. There is a danger to you, Thorinn." "I see it." With grim haste, Thorinn was dipping the brush into the pitch pot, dabbing a spot the size of his fingernail onto the sole of each shoe. He unfastened the cord from about his waist, then slung the box over his shoulder, leaped out again, and drifted toward the floor. "Where do these doorways go?" he demanded. "One of them goes to a shaft where rising clouds carry things upward. The other goes to a shaft where falling water carries things down." Thorinn's good foot touched the floor, clung. He strained forward, tugging the bladder after him. Another step, then another. The great awkward bulk of the bladder was in motion now, but it prevented him from looking back to see how close the engine was. Lurching from good foot to bad, Thorinn tugged the bladder onward. Now he could see that there were spidery arms on the tracks, shaped to grip the metal eggs. While he watched, another dripping egg emerged from one of the doorways, traveled rapidly away, and was gone. It was no good asking the box which doorway was which, for he knew it would lie. Then he saw that was the answer. "Box," he said, which is the shaft that goes up?" "It is the one on the left, Thorinn." With a humorless grin, Thorinn leaped for the metal track on the right. The bladder bobbed up beside him. Clinging like a fly to the metal, Thorinn drew the bladder in. The red dot, now a disc, was shockingly near. He settled the bladder on the track between 2 spidery arms, saw them close to hold it, and tumbled into the basket as the track began to move, first slowly, then with each speed that the air whistled past his cheeks. Ahead, the doorway was blocked by a silvery pink film. It broke as the bladder entered it, and the air was suddenly full of flying droplets of spray. Bladder, basket, Thorinn, and all were whirled out and downward into a chaos of roaring water. "Go down," said the voice triumphantly in his head. That's the end of chapter 12.